Okay, hello everybody. My name is Jacob Jans. I am the editor of Freedom with Writing and the co-founder of Writing Launch. And today we're giving you a free preview of our 3-week course, Break into Blog Writing. And today you're going to learn how to get paid as a freelance blogger without running a blog, which really, in my opinion, is the best way to earn money as a blogger. And I say that because I actually make my living running a blog. And let me tell you about how I spend my hours, the hard way of making money with blogging. So my days are spent running this blog, and I spend a lot of time with email. And I spend a lot of time managing ads, building the audience so people will read what we publish. I spend a lot of money making sure that the ads are operating and that we're building our business. And as you can see the number there, that's not a small amount of money. And I also program opt-in pages, code email templates, optimize WordPress layouts. Running a blog that makes you money means running a business, which leaves very little time for writing. And that's right for some people and not for others. So freelance blogging, on the other hand, means you actually get to write, which brings us to Ian Chandler, who is the head instructor of Writing Launch. I first met Ian when he sent me a pitch because he wanted to be a freelance blogger for the blog that I run, Freedom with Writing. And he sent me the pitch. I accepted the pitch and paid him to write for the blog. And he got to do the writing, and I brought the audience to his writing. And I actually hired him to write the book, The No BS Guide to Freelance Writing. He didn't have to promote the book. I did because as the publisher, I took that on as my responsibility. As you can see, the book did very well, 5 stars, 60 customer reviews. And he was the writer and I was the publisher. And what I want you to focus on here is, if you want to have the easy way for getting paid as a blogger, let the publishers run the business so you can focus on writing. And that's what we do at Writing Launch, is we help writers get paid to write by helping them connect with publishers that pay. Steve King watched one of our webinars very similar to this one, and he picked up a writing job that earned him around $6,500. Kelly Poulin, one of our students, just got published in Spirituality and Health magazine, and now her writing is on newsstands all around the world, well, all around the country and the world. Susan Lewis, another one of our students, just got published in Sassy, another national publication. Allison Bossert watched a webinar just like this and used one of the tips to get published in the LA Times. There are hundreds of blogs that need your writing. The blog I run, Freedom with Writing, is just one of those. And actually, we're going to be sending you a big list of blogs that accept pitches from freelance writers later on. And in this presentation, Ian is actually going to be showing you how to find those blogs as well. So in short, freelance blogging means you get to actually write, you pitch, you build relationships with editors. Running a blog means building an audience, managing the accounting, dealing with technology, lots of marketing, advertising, etc. It's not really the same as writing. And I know many of you want to turn your passion and your love for writing, or whatever your reasons are for writing, into an income. So today, you're going to learn how to get paid to write as a freelance blogger. And Ian Chandler, who I mentioned before, is going to be giving you that presentation. Here is Ian.
Thank you, Jacob. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I hope you're doing really well. We have a great presentation for you today. As Jacob mentioned, we're going to be talking all about how to become a freelance blogger without having to set up and run your own site. And that's something I have experience with, because about 3 years ago, I tried to set up a blog of my own and get it running, and it failed miserably, mostly because I didn't have the time, the energy, nor the money to really get it off the ground. And my blog writing career, on the other hand, that is writing for already existing blogs, has been much more lucrative. And it's what I do all the time. It's one of my main sources of income. And I'm confident that it can be the same for you. It's a very easy way to either get started or just find a new opportunity to write. So I really hope you'll enjoy today's presentation. And without further ado, let's get started.
Hey, Ian, quick note. Can you maybe adjust your microphone? It seems to be a little fuzzy.
Oh, sure. Get this right. Okay. All right, so today's preview comes from the course Breaking the Blog Writing that we have at Writing Launch. It's our course that talks all about how to get started becoming a freelance blogger. So all of the information that you're going to learn today is going to be from that course. Now, we've talked a little bit about why running your own blog isn't a good idea unless you're really prepared. So I wanted to talk about quickly the advantages of blog writing, which is what I'm going to be calling freelance blogging from now on, just to discern between the two. So we will be talking about how to become basically a regular writer for an already existing blog. So we're not going to be talking about running your own blog, but I think that writing for existing blogs, as we covered, it's a lot easier, it's a lot more lucrative. It's a flexible opportunity. There's lots of room for growth. So if you just want to, take on something new, or if you need a good path to follow to really grow your career, this is a great way to do that. And as Jacob mentioned, there are so many great blogs out there who pay writers well and who need your content. They need your perspective. That's what they thrive on. And so as a result, a lot of blogs are willing to pay very well, much more than what you might get at, say a Content Mill or something like that. And for many writers, it's a plain fun job. You can often choose what you get to write about. You can write in your own style. It's not really super limiting. So in that way, it's a really liberating job. And you can also just choose your niche. You can choose which blogs you write for, that sort of thing. It's really flexible. So if you're interested, let's talk about starting out. How do you start out as a freelance blog writer? The first thing you really have to ask yourself is the simple question, is blog writing for me? Because, frankly, it's not for everybody, but I think it's the best way to do freelance writing in this day and age. So the first thing you want to do is just really be prepared for it, know what you're getting yourself into. For example, you'll have to write consistently under deadlines. Usually that can be anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks or even longer, depending on how long the content is. You might be doing a feature article that takes a whole month to write. You might be doing a quick 500-word post that just takes a day or two to write, but you will have to follow deadlines pretty consistently. You're also going to have to pretty thoroughly research some topics. Now, this isn't as hard as it seems, but you just have to sort of switch gears and get used to it if you're not already. You may have to do some additional work. So for example, you might have to find some media, like usually images, to go along with your work. You might have to do a little bit of keyword stuff here and there. It's not a lot to worry about. It's really easy to learn. But like I said, you just want to know what you're getting into ahead of time so you can prepare yourself for it and gain the knowledge beforehand. And as you might have ascertained, this requires a good amount of self-motivation and time and task management. If you're not self-driven, it's going to be hard to find the urge, the drive to really do this day after day after day. But I think it's a great way of learning those skills and cultivating those disciplines. So if you're struggling with that, you might just want to look into blog writing as a way to sort of train yourself in those areas, because I know it certainly has worked wonders for me, and especially in my productivity. And something that I wanted to point out here is that very often you may be assigned just general topics to write on and given very light instructions, so you really have to fill in the blanks. And this is something that happens to me all the time. I'm just given maybe even sometimes the title of an article, and I have to go from there. And it can be sort of daunting at first, but over time, like I said, you get used to it. It's just something that I think a lot of beginner blog writers don't really know about. So that's something you want to be aware of ahead of time. Now, to help you decide if blog writing is really for you, we have a little bonus for you. It's a little handout called Is Blog Writing for You? And it's actually our first day of our course, Breaking the Blog Writing, and we're going to give it to you absolutely free. So you can get a little peek into the type of content that we have in the course, but more importantly, you can decide whether blog writing is something you want to pursue. It's just a little guide that will help you determine, if what your expectations are, if they match up, your skill set, stuff like that. So give it a look. We'll be sending it to you through email over the next few days, and I think you're really going to like it, and I think it's going to be useful for you if you're on the fence trying to decide, is blog writing something I want to pursue? Now, when you break it down, you can break down blog writing into a simple two-step process. Basically, you find blogs in your niche, and then you pitch article ideas to those blogs. And of course, it's more complicated than this, but the general process goes something like this. And so I'm going to be talking about those steps. I'll break those down and talk about how to not only find blogs, but how to successfully pitch article ideas to those blogs so you get published and ideally paid for your work. So first, let's talk about how to find blogs. This is often a source of, it's a problem area for a lot of writers because finding good blogs can be problematic. Some blogs don't really pay a lot. A lot of blogs that pay well are hard to find. So it raises the question, how do you find good blogs that pay well? So let's talk about that. What I recommend is looking for what I'm going to be calling medium level blogs. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean blogs that aren't incredibly huge, like, they're not Huffington Post level, but not blogs that are really small, or maybe, no one reads or 5 people read or something like that. And the reason that medium level blogs are the sweet spot is because those small blogs that don't have very many readers, they often can't afford to pay writers. These blogs might be blogs that are just trying to get off the ground, and they really can't, they don't have the budget to pay writers well, if at all. So you want to avoid those. But likewise, you want to avoid super large blogs because they often don't pay writers, and that's because they provide exposure. Publications like the Huffington Post and like sites like Forbes are infamous for doing this. And it's easy to think that getting on one of these big sites is going to transform your career or be a really good piece for your portfolio. And while they don't lack value, but they're just not as great as people make them out to be. So if you get on the Huffington Post or something, it's not going to make a huge difference in your career. So what you want to do is look for those blogs that are sort of in between those. And medium level blogs are going to be the blogs that pay well because they have both the budget and the readership to justify that. Now, how do you spot medium level blogs? Because, this can be a tricky area. Let's go into some detail on this. One thing you want to look for is a site that has plenty of bylined authors. So what I mean by that is just simply, if you look at the posts that are on the site, they should be from a variety of different writers, and those writers should have explicit bylines crediting their name. And this shows that they have a healthy rotation of freelance writers who supply content for them. And this is a great sign, probably one of the strongest signs of a blog that is that medium level that pays really well, that hires out work to freelancers. You also want to look to see if there's lots of comments. A good comment section is a really good indication that a lot of people are reading it. And if a lot of people are reading the blog, then that usually means the blog can pay for articles. You also might want to look for positive press. For example, if the blog you're looking at has been featured on or linked to by other blogs, that's a really good sign. And I think doing just a quick Google search on the blog you're considering, that's a good idea no matter what. You want to see what they're about, a little history about them. You want to get to know the publication that you're approaching before you go in and just pitch an idea. Now let's talk about some Google search techniques. This is something that is we can go surprisingly in depth into, and in some of our courses I do. But today I wanted to give you a brief overview of how to enhance your Google searches to help you find blogs in a quicker and better. And so let's say your niche is writing. You might want to try some of these search phrases. So maybe you might be searching writing blog. That's your search right now. But you can make this even more in depth. So for example, take a look at this this little search phrase. So this whole thing would go in the search bar. And basically what's happening here is that you're searching for a site that has both the phrase guest post and the word writing. And those quotes around the words make sure that Google is showing you results that have that exact phrase or that exact word. And then the plus is just making sure that the results have both of those words. And there are a few variations on this. For example, writing and writer's guidelines, submission guidelines, Write For Us. These are all different names for the same thing, basically, that that page, the writer's guidelines page that tells you the basically just the guidelines of how to submit, how to pitch. And if you want to find these pages specifically, it's good to search for the specific name. So contrast this with if you're searching writing blog, that could return a bunch of different results that you could get lots of results about just writing for blogs and stuff you're not even interested in. So these little search phrases and tips are a great way of narrowing down your search and really refining it to make sure that you're getting the kind of results, the search results that you want. So take a look at these. I would recommend trying them out. It's really easy to get the hang of once you do it a few times, and it really helps to, like I said, refine your results. And you can search, whatever your niche is, just replace writing with that. It's a really easy and intuitive way. Try it out and see what it does for you. And like I said, these just go into the search bar as is, from the first quote to the last quote. Now let's talk about some key components of finding blogs successfully. Like I mentioned, there's that writer's guidelines page. You're probably familiar with this. It's just that page that tells you, how to pitch, how to submit, what the publication is looking for. It also goes by those other names that I mentioned, like submission guidelines and Write For Us, names like that. But this page is crucial. This is going to be your guide, your step-by-step guide for writing for that publication. And so it's really important that you read it thoroughly. And you want to read it, every single letter of this page, because often if you don't read them, you won't get, your pitch won't even get read. So this is the most important first step to really successfully becoming a freelance blogger, is learning to read these pages, understand what they mean, the terms, all of that. And they spell out exactly what the publication is looking for. And if you follow the rules that they lay out in the guidelines, it's almost surefire that you'll get at least a response from an editor. And like I mentioned, you may get your pitch just flat out rejected or not even read if you don't read the guidelines and follow them. And also the guidelines will almost always tell you if a publication pays or not. So if if you find a blog and you're looking for paid work, you go to their guidelines page and it doesn't mention pay, or it mentions, we can't pay our writers, then you know to avoid that blog. So that's a really invaluable aspect of these pages. And they'll usually also tell you how much the blog pays per article and how they pay. So whether that's by PayPal or by check or something like that, they'll usually detail that. If not, that's something that you'll have to talk to the editor about. But quite often you'll know just from reading the guidelines. So you can see how much important information is contained in these pages. And that's why I highly, highly recommend learning to read them, read them down to the T. It's very important. I can't stress this enough. And while we're on the topic of payment, let's talk about that, because at Writing Launch, we believe that writers should get paid for their work, and that's what we want to help you do, is get paid for your work. And so with that in mind, you don't want to be writing for free, and you don't want to be writing for peanuts. It can be tricky to find a blog that pays really well. But if you know the tips that I've shared and will share, it becomes a lot easier. But still, you want to make sure that you're working for the amount that you deserve. Now, what I recommend is calculating how much work is involved. So think about what would be involved for any specific blog, and just take it one blog at a time as a case-by-case basis. Do you have to find media? Do you have to do any SEO, conduct other research, complete other tasks? If you have to find, a lot of images and do a lot of research, that's going to be more work than if you could just, sit at the computer and write a post in an hour. So you want to figure all the work into what you have to do. Figure these tasks into the pay, and compare that to what maybe other writers are earning. More involved articles should pay more. So if you have to do a lot of research for an article, that should always pay more than just something you can sit down and type out in an hour, like I said. So to help you with this, we're going to send you a second bonus, which is our paid publishing guidebook. And this is, I think, my favorite resource that we send out to people. It's a huge compendium of publications that pay. Some are both physical publications and online. Some are online only, but there's hundreds of blogs that pay for your work, and we're going to be sending it to you absolutely free. This is the resource that I wish that I'd had when I was started out, because I spent so long just trying to find blogs that paid anything. And so to have a resource like this that cuts down the time, it saves months of research. I'm not even exaggerating. It's one of the best resources that we offer, and we're going to be sending it to you absolutely free. Look out for it in your email over the next few days. I think you'll really enjoy this one. Now that we've talked about how to find blogs, let's talk about how to pitch blogs. Now, this is a topic that is so expansive that we even have our own course on it, the Bulletproof Pitching System. But today we're going to be going over it, just hitting the most important bullet points of how to pitch blogs successfully, because this is, finding a blog is half the battle, and this is the other half. Now, ideally, you should be a reader of the blog. Now, you don't have to be. You can check up on it. You can read some of it as you go. But if you've been a reader of a blog and then you want to write for that blog, it makes the whole process more seamless, makes it very smooth, because you already know the style, the type of content they publish, that sort of thing. And at the very least, you should read at least 5 to 10 articles from the blog, and that's so you can get an idea, like I said, of the style of the writing style, the style of content they publish, what they might be looking for in an article. It also helps you determine if you're a good fit for that blog or not. And you want to analyze these articles pretty in detail for content and style. See what they're doing, see if it's similar to what you do, see if it complements your style. If not, then you may want to reconsider. This is really important, because you want to write for blogs that that fit your style and that your style will fit into. And when you look at the content, you think about things just as simple as, what are these articles about? How specific are they? When you look at style, maybe you think about the kind of writing voice that's at work and how the articles are structured. And like I said, see if it's similar to what you do, because if it is, that's a really good sign. And if not, like I mentioned, you may want to reconsider that or look elsewhere. And reading these articles and doing this analysis is going to give you a solid knowledge of what topics the blog publishes, what they want in articles from freelancers, and who their audience is. And those are 3 crucial puzzle pieces to this whole picture. You not only need to know what they publish, but what they're looking for. And you also want to know who the audience is so that you can write for that audience. It's very important information that I recommend you think about. And even if you're a reader of a blog, I recommend doing this analysis anyway, because it might allow you to discover some things that you hadn't previously noticed. So I basically recommend it for everybody. And once you've done that and you have a general grasp of what the publication is looking for, go ahead and brainstorm anywhere from maybe 5 to 15 article ideas, roughly. And think about when you're brainstorming, don't just write down anything, vet your ideas first. Ask yourself, could you realistically see the blog publishing these articles? Imagine your article headline on this blog. Does it fit? Does it seem out of place? You want to be kind of really honest with yourself, because that's going to allow you to refine your ideas and make sure that you're only pitching the best one. Something that I recommend doing is comparing your article ideas to existing articles on the blog. And you want them to be similar yet different. And that sounds confusing, but let me show you an example. So let's take Freedom with Writing. An article that appeared on there is the 7 magazines that pay writers $150 or more per article. Pretty straightforward. Now let's say I wanted to write for this blog, and I was trying to think of ideas for articles that might be similar in vein, but different enough to warrant their own article. So the example I came up with was 9 trade publications that pay $200 or more per article. So you can see it's the exact same layout, but it addresses a totally different topic for a totally different audience, and it has a different pay rate to it. So it's similar enough to what they publish about, but it's different enough that it would make a good post on its own. So if let's say you had another example of 7 blogs that pay writers $150 or more per article. That might be a little too similar to the existing article, and they might say, okay, we already have an article like that one. So you want to make sure that you're hitting a different aspect in this niche. And that's really important when you're brainstorming. Like I said, vet your ideas as you go along. Think realistically, be honest with yourself. It will pay off in the long run. Also think about what type of article would best satisfy the blog's readers, because ultimately, you're writing not really for the editor, but for the readers of the blog. So look at what the blog readers are saying. Look through the comments sections or look on their social media pages. See if they're asking for any specific topics or talking about any specific topics or articles. If blog readers want to see something in the blog, you can take the initiative and write about that or pitch those ideas. And this is great because you're taking article ideas directly from the people who read the blog. After you do all of this, settle on one idea to pitch. Even if you have 15, 20, 25 ideas or even more, you want to whittle it down to just one idea. Now, some writers do pitch several ideas in one pitch. I recommend not doing that, just because when you pitch one idea, it's so much clearer. The editor has a lot less work to do, which is great for them because, as we'll see and as we've seen with Jacob's intro, editors are super busy. They don't have time to read these long pitches for, 5 different articles. So settling on one idea and pitching that idea is a fantastic way of pitching that will increase your chances of getting published dramatically. And just pitch like you would for a print publication. We do have other webinars on our YouTube channel available about pitching, so if you'd like, go and watch some of those. They go a little more in depth into pitching, and I'll talk about that here as well. But you just want to approach it like you would for any other publication. Blogs are really no different in that regard. You want to start with a short intro. You don't want to, talk all about your article. You don't want to essentially write the article in the pitch. You just want to keep it short and to the point. And you want to pitch your story in 1 to 2 concise paragraphs, anywhere from 2 to 3 sentences each. And these are not, hard and fast rules. They're just guidelines to help you make your pitch better. Short pitches are just generally better. So don't go overboard. Don't go really long. If that's what you're used to, it might take some dramatic change to get used to this style, but it really helps your chances of getting published. And then I recommend ending with a question, and this is a little trick that I learned just by experience, where I found that ending with a question tends to get a response from the editor. And that's because when you do this, you create a dialogue with the editor. You're not just saying, thank you, or I hope to hear from you soon. You're engaging them directly in conversation, and that just naturally kicks in that human instinct to respond, because if someone asks you a question, it's just going to be instinctual to answer, and that's what's going on here. So it's a little almost psychological trick that works very well. Now, after about a week or two, depending on the size of the blog, if you haven't gotten a response, follow up. This is critical. This is one of the other aspects that I just can't stress enough. A polite, well-timed follow-up can really mean the difference between publication and rejection. So many editors get so many pitches, as Jacob shared, he gets so many emails a day, hundreds. And when you get that many emails, you sort of, you miss pitches every now and then. And sometimes an editor will read a pitch and like it, but just sort of forget about it and, forget to respond to it. So if you respond, if you follow up, that can mean that can make all the difference in the world. So depending on the size of the blog, if it's a smaller blog, a week is fine. If it's a larger blog, 2 to 3 weeks is appropriate. But just make sure you follow up. Now, I should add a caveat here, and that is in some writers' guidelines pages, some blogs will say, if you haven't heard from us in X days or X weeks, you can pitch elsewhere or assume we're not interested or something like that. And that's another reason why you should read the writers' guidelines pages, because if a blog says, oh, if you don't hear from us in 10 days, assume we're not interested, and then you follow up 2 weeks later, that's not going to look so good. So you definitely want to pay attention to the writer's guidelines page and see if it says anything about following up. Now, I wanted to show you quickly a pitch that I did about a year ago that was successful, and I wanted to talk about how the ideas that I've discussed in the webinar apply here. So you'll notice a few different things. First of all, I didn't start with the infamous pitch, introduction to whom it may concern. It's 2018. That's pretty outdated, and in a world where you can easily find the editor that you're pitching to, it comes across often as lazy. So I found the name of the specific editor that I was pitching to, and often this will be in the writer's guidelines page. If not, you might have to check the about page or the masthead to find the specific editor that you're pitching, but just make sure it's the right one. Usually the writer's guidelines page will tell you. So I briefly talked about, how I came across the site, and I'm very interested in the blog. So you'll notice I have that short intro right away. I'm not talking for a long time about how I found the blog and how much I love it. I just get straight to the point. Now there's this section, which is my main pitch, and you'll see this is just 4 sentences. 2 concise paragraphs. So I talk about, my article will explain why readers should invest time in creating long-form guides for their blogs. And I state what I'm going to do in the article. I'll go over how content like this can help sites rank better and give a blog more authority and value to visitors. It's very short and to the point, but it gives all the detail that is really necessary. So just reading that, even you can get an essence of what my article is about without really reading it. And that's key for editors, because they want that short and sweet description of your article, because that means they don't have to wade through, a sea of text to get the meaning. And then I just talk about, I'll discuss how to create them, although perhaps that might be better for a separate post. And I'll also point to examples like this one. I just linked a relevant example, and it's over. My pitch is done, basically. And the rest is just closing it out and sealing the deal, if you will. So notice how short this is, and I'm sure that a lot of you maybe have done pitches that are a lot longer, and you might think that this is just crazy, but it works like a charm. And then I move on to just a short biography about myself, a little about me. I talk about where I've been published, and I link my portfolio. And notice how the links are very easy to click on. The editor doesn't have to copy or paste anything. She can just click on them. That's crucial. You want to make it as easy for the editor as possible. And that's the whole slant we're going for here, with the short pitch, with the easy to click links. That's all part of the plan to make it just as easy as possible for the editor. And notice also that I didn't include a long biography like you might see at the end of an article or at the end of a book or something like that. I just talked about, where I've been published, and then if you're interested, you can, check out my portfolio here. So it's easily accessible. She can view my work if she wants to, or just, kind of ignore that. And then notice how I end here. I say, I can have this ready in a week. Does that sound good? Now, I do have a little thank you line after this, but often I will just end with this question. So I won't even have that little thank you line. I'll just say, I can have this ready in this amount of time. Does that sound good? And like I mentioned, that prompts the editor into just naturally wanting to respond. And this pitch did very well for me. I got a successful pitch out of it. I published the article, got paid very well for it. And if you like writing about animals, I recommend checking out this site because they still accept articles, BlogPause. But the goal of showing you this is just to demonstrate how the ideas I've talked about really do work. From finding a good blog to making the pitch as easy as possible to digest for the editor, to ending with the question, to making a short pitch about your article. I hope that this is a really good example. It worked, like I said, it was successful for me. And this sort of template is what you want to be thinking about when you're doing your own pitches. And with that in mind, I have a third and final bonus for you, and it's my road-tested pitch template. This is the pitch template that I've used to get published. It's based on the pitch you've seen and tons of other pitches that I have done over the years. I basically took a bunch of my pitches, found the common threads, and then developed a template based on all the successful parts of those pitches. So you're going to get this absolutely free. You don't need to do anything. It's just going to be sent to your email in a few days, and I think you're really going to like it. It's short and sweet to the point, and if you're used to those longer form pitches, this will really help you get used to the idea of pitching using shorter pitches. Like I said, you want to just do one or two paragraphs introducing your article. If you have trouble with that, feel free to use this pitch template. I do recommend customizing it, making it your own. Don't just use it word for word, but it's a little source of inspiration if you're having trouble pitching or if you're just not used to doing these shorter style of pitches. So now I'd like to answer your questions. If you have any questions, please ask them. We are here to help you learn. I'm going to be going through as many questions as I can in our time here, about 20 minutes left. And like I mentioned, if you have any questions, please ask them. We are here for you. Anything about pitching or finding blogs or writing for blogs, any questions like that, I welcome. So let me take a look at what you have. Let me stop screen sharing. All right, so let me take a look at some of the questions we have. All right. Let's see. Okay, we have a question from, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, but from Mihika. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not good with names. Who asks, I have a question. I've always been reprimanded that I shouldn't work without a contract, but do publications such as the New York Times, The Guardian, etc., work on a contract basis? How do I bring into play the entire contract thing? This is a really good question, and this is something that a lot of writers don't know about because it's not very obvious. I definitely agree that you should never work without a contract. It's sort of a unique area in working for blogs. Usually, let's say you're working for a client. Let's just say you're working for a small business. You're doing like just some ad copy for them. In that case, you definitely want to have a contract to protect yourself. When you're working with a blog, the writer's guidelines page or should have something about a sort of contractual agreement, because when you write for a blog, you sort of enter into a contractual agreement even if you don't sign a contract. And it's actually pretty strange how this works, because some blogs sort of operate on good faith, and that can sound a little shaky, but most of the time it works out just fine, because a publication like the New York Times is certainly going to pay you if you get accepted, and you might actually sign a contract in the process. I've had a lot of experiences where I've written for a blog and they've sent me a contract or something like a freelancer's agreement or something like that. Sometimes they'll send you a tax form, but in some way you likely will sign a contract at some point. Otherwise, a lot of it just goes off of the publication's reputation, which is why half the battle is really finding good blogs. You don't want to be finding these seedy blogs that you're not sure if they pay or not. you definitely want to make sure that you're writing for a reputable blog. So if there's no contract, brought up, I wouldn't bring it up. Just do your diligent research. Find out if the blog is reputable or not. If they seem not too reputable, I would stay away. You want to make sure you're only writing for the best blogs you can find. But that's a great question, because that's a really tricky area to navigate if you're not used to it. So thank you for that question. We have an interesting question from Jan, who asks, what title do you use in the pitch email to the editor? So I'm assuming this means the subject line of the email. And something, I'll share with you a little trick here in a minute. Usually I just use the subject line of pitch, or pitch and then a colon, and then I have the article title. And sometimes the writer's guidelines page will actually tell you what to title your email, and that's because they want to just make sure that they are able to easily see the pitches and filter them from all the other emails they get. And if the writer's guidelines page mentions that, definitely follow it. But a little trick that I like to use for subject lines is putting this at the beginning of the email, and it's a capital R, capital E, and then a colon. So it's colon. And this works really well to start pretty much any subject line. It's something that I learned sort of from experience, sort of from learning what other people were doing. But it simply means regarding. But a lot of people process that as reply. And so what happens is people are more likely to click on that, because if they think it means reply, they'll sort of go, oh, this must be a conversation I'm already in. And so they'll have a higher chance of clicking it. And it also just, it's very eye-catching, with those big capital letters. It enhances visibility. So, when you're going through a crowded inbox, let's say an editor has hundreds of emails and they're all, just competing for their attention, having those capital letters can really, really help stand out, make your email stand out in the inbox. So that's a little trick that I use. But yeah, usually I just will say, pitch or pitch and then the article title. But like I mentioned, if the writer's guidelines page has instructions on what you should use for the subject line, definitely pay attention to that and use that. So thank you for that question. That's a really good one. Let's see. We have a good question from Michael, who asks, let's say you have 3 separate areas you want to blog about and you are just starting. Do you go after one at a time, or do you work on all 3? This is a question that we get a lot. And in fact, we have a section of our course, the No BS course on freelance writing, that talks about defining and finding your niche. Something that I talk about in that course is the idea that a lot of writers are, jacks of all trades. They write for a smattering of different blogs and niches. So, you might have one writer who writes about everything from spirituality to finance to parenting. And so in that way, you can get writers who are pretty spread out topic-wise. What I recommend, though, is focusing on just one niche at first. And the reason is because it allows you to take a much more focused approach to your writing. It allows you to really explore a niche, dig into it, find out what's there, find out what opportunities are there. And I think that's a lot more effective than, trying to balance 3, 4, 5, or even more niches. Because at that point, you're just all over the place. And, that saying, jack of all trades, master of none, is very true in this sense. So I would recommend starting out with just one. If it doesn't work out, you can certainly pivot to one of the other ones. There's nothing wrong with that. You definitely want to find what your sort of specialty is, because many of the best writers in the world, past, present, and future, have specialized in a certain area. So, for example, I specialize in marketing, business, writing, that sort of general field. And I have maybe, those 2 or 3 strong topic areas, but I used to write about a lot more. I used to write about, 10 plus topics, 10 plus niches. And I found that it was certainly helpful in some ways, but detrimental in others. And I think now that I'm focused on just a few niches, and usually just one, I usually just write about business, it's really allowed me to find better opportunities to hone my approach and to take a more focused focused perspective toward the work that I do. So yeah, start with just one, but if you're not having success, definitely pivot. Nothing wrong with that. So thank you for that question. That was a great question. All right, let's see what else we have. Okay, we have a few questions about portfolios. So Catherine asks, what if your portfolio is not online yet, or what if you're just starting out? Ty asks, what about individuals starting out in blog writing with little experience or no portfolio? And this is a question that we get regularly. What if you don't have a portfolio, or what if you are just starting out? And there are a couple ways to deal with this. One is to find blogs, and this is sort of a mixed approach. It's not the best approach, but it's not the worst one. A lot of writers will find blogs that accept articles for free and maybe do 2 or 3 free articles and to sort of build up a portfolio. But something else that you want to keep in mind, and I think this is a better approach to take, is to just not really worry about it. And that's because a lot of blog editors, and certainly good blog editors, usually don't care about what experience you have, because they want good content. They want good, solid content from a writer who knows what he or she is doing, and they'll value that over what credentials a person has. So compare, let's say you have 2 writers, and one of them has a PhD and submits an article that isn't really that good, or their pitch isn't really that good. And then you have someone who just has high school experience and submits an article that just ticks every box and knocks it out of the park. That second writer is likely going to get the gig over the first writer just on the merit of good content. So when you're pitching, I wouldn't draw, maybe don't draw attention to it, but just say, a little about me. I'm a writer based in, the city, the state, whatever, and I write about these topics. That's a good sort of standby if your portfolio is not up yet, or if you're just starting out. So that's what I'd recommend. Thank you for those questions, by the way. And I know that it can be sort of daunting if you don't have a portfolio, but I encourage you to approach blog writing with confidence, because as long as you tick these boxes that we talked about, as long as you read the writer's guidelines page, as long as you provide good content, you'll likely get published and paid for it. So don't worry too much about it. Don't let experience stop you, because freelance writing is, and I talk about this all the time, it really doesn't require any experience. It doesn't require formal training. By that I mean education. You don't need to have a bachelor's in English or something like that to be a successful writer. You just need to have the knowledge and the know-how to get started, and that's what Writing Lunch we're all about. So thank you for those questions. Let's get a couple more. Here's a good question from Tiffany, who asks, for a new writer, what's the best way to negotiate your freelancing fee? Now, I'm going to answer this question in the context of blog writing. So when you're reaching out to a blog to get published, the blog will always have set rates for writers. Now, of course, they might offer more to more experienced writers, but in most cases, at least from my experience, how much a blog pays is going to be the same whether you have a PhD in English or whether you just are writing for fun and you don't have any education or any experience or anything like that. The pay will usually be the same. So it's not really something that you can negotiate. It's just something that you need to research, and that's why reading the Writer's Guidelines page is so important. You want to make sure that like we talked about, how much the blog pays and how they pay, because if it's too low, you might just want to not consider it. If you're working for hours and you only get $25 for a piece that's maybe a couple thousand words, that's not really a good trade-off. So that's something you want to be really palpably aware of when you're doing your research. So that's a great question. Thank you. Let's see. We have a great question from Deborah, who asks, as a newbie, where do I find paying blogs? Is it feasible to do your own blog after a time? So there's kind of 2 questions here. First, where to find paying blogs. I will say just, and this might seem a little biased, but the Paid Publishing Guidebook that we're sending to you is, in my opinion, hands down the best resource to find paying blogs. What I had to do when I started out, and even after I started out, like well into my freelancing career, I would have to do those, in-depth Google searches, for hours on end just to find a blog that paid, above, a blog that paid more than just peanuts. And so having a resource like this, we can see where publications are, like where their websites are, where their writers guidelines pages are, how much they pay, what they publish about. That's so helpful. And like I said, I wish that I had it when I was starting out, because it would have saved months of research and hard work. So if you're looking for paying blogs, that would be my number one resource. And then also using those Google search techniques that we talked about. And Deborah also asked, is it feasible to do your own blog after a time? And I find that a lot of writers who want to blog, after they start blog writing, they don't really want to run their own blog anymore. And certainly for me, it was a case of, wow, this is so easy. I can get paid for actually writing instead of, as Jacob mentioned, having to run a blog and get an audience and stuff like that. It really is a little less glamorous than it's made out to be, and that's certainly something I learned the hard way. So it's definitely feasible, if that's something you want to pursue, but I think it's so different from freelance writing or freelance blogging, because it requires so much more. Think back to, like I said, Jacob's presentation at the beginning. There's so much work involved, and I could never stay on top of it. So I think just after you experiment with blog writing a little bit, you might find yourself not wanting to go back to the other side of things. So I hope that answers your question. Really good questions. Let's see. Okay, we have a really good question, actually two questions from Karen. She asks, when you get assignments requiring SEO, are you required to conduct analytic research, or are you assigned keywords and phrases to insert into your work? This is a great question, and I think this will help clarify what I talked about, actually. So when I say SEO, it's if you're not familiar with that term, it simply means search engine optimization, which is basically just a field that allows you, a field of research, and it basically helps your site become more visible in Google. So when you search something in Google, if you have good SEO, you'll show up on the first page, and then you'll get more people visiting your website. And a lot of blogs are looking for that, because obviously blogs want to attract people to their website, and if they perform well in a Google search, if they're one of the first results you see, that's going to drive a lot of people to that site. And so to that end, a lot of editors will incorporate some SEO into their articles. Now, a lot of times, as Karen mentioned, all that you need to do is insert a few keywords. So let's say you're writing an article on meditation, and let's say the editor gives you the assignment, and they say, we want you to use the phrase guided meditation 5 times. And so all you have to do is, find 5 instances where you can use that phrase guided meditation. The majority of SEO related articles are going to be that. That's all you have to do. Rarely will you have to do more, because the editors take care of that for you. And funny enough, that's one of the benefits that you get as a blog writer, as opposed to someone who runs a blog. When I ran my own blog, I had to do all of that myself. Very technical stuff that took a while to learn, and I never quite mastered it, because it takes years to get good at SEO, the really detailed stuff. So really, all you have to worry about is fitting those keywords into your article. And then her second question was, is there a distinction between a blog and an article? I would say there is a distinction between a blog and an article, because, and then this sort of draws some attention to the ambiguity of terms that we use. So for example, blog post, and article mean the same thing to some people, but they can mean completely different things to other people. The way that I use them, and I think most people use them, generally a blog refers to the entire site. Some people use blog to mean article, like, I published a blog, but I think that usage has really fallen by the wayside, and now we just use it to describe an entire site that publishes content. A blog post and an article, I think there is some difference between those, but not much. For example, all blog posts are articles, but not all articles are blog posts. So, a blog post might just be a 500-word post that's just appearing online, but an article could be, an article on a blog, or an article in a trade publication, in a scholarly journal. It really ranges. So personally, I use blog post and article pretty interchangeably, but usually I use blog post when I'm talking about a shorter piece of content, and an article when I'm talking about a longer piece of content, or a piece of content that doesn't appear solely on a blog. So it's a little confusing, admittedly, but it really is important to understand these terms. So in summary, a blog is just the entire site that publishes content. A blog post is a shorter piece that appears online, and an article is a longer piece that appears either online or in print elsewhere. So thank you for that question. I think that's really good information that writers need to know when they're starting out. Let's answer a couple more questions, and then we'll let you go. We have a question from, let me see. Oh, okay, this is an interesting question. We have one from Terry, who asks, is it ever recommended to send the article without the pitch so they can see your work? The answer to this is no. And in fact, this brings attention to an area that I didn't really cover, but that I'll mention now. Some publications, some blogs want you to submit entire articles and not just pitches. So they want a pitch and an article. And I recommend avoiding these if you can, just because if they say no to your article, that's, an hour, 2 hours, 5 hours that you've just kind of that has gone down the drain. It's much better to just send the pitch first. And in my experience, at least, the best publications, the best blogs are the ones that just ask for a pitch. And that's because they want to, they want to vet your idea. They want to see if it jives with their style, with their blog. If they're asking for the entire article, you run into the problem of, they could steal the article, or they could just not use it, and then my time is wasted. So I definitely recommend just sending a pitch. If they ask for an article, you can if you want to, but what any good blog should do is be able to look at your portfolio or previous work that you've published, and go from there and use that as the resource to see what your style is like. And like I mentioned, if you don't have a portfolio, don't sweat it, because in many ways, your actual pitch is an indicator of your writing style. It's sort of a little preview into your writing style. So don't worry about it too much. But if they ask for an article, let's say you pitch them and then they ask for an article, you can think about that. I personally wouldn't recommend it, just because there's a lot of risk involved. But that's certainly something to be aware of. So thank you for your question. Okay, let's get to maybe one more. Let's see. Okay, we have a question from Julie, who asks, can you suggest some sites that we could use to put a portfolio together as we gain experience? Yeah, I've talked about some of these in previous webinars. One that comes to mind is Contently, which is spelled just content and then LY. They have a free portfolio site. If you want to see mine, you can go to ianchandler.contently.com. It's really easy to add your articles there. You just get links to your articles and put them on there, and it makes a nice looking portfolio for you. That would be the one that I would recommend. You can also use LinkedIn if you want to as a portfolio. I think they have a portfolio feature. But the only thing you need to be really aware of is making sure that an editor can easily access your work. Now, if you let's say you just have maybe one example of your work. If that's the case, you can just link that in your pitch. That'll be fine. Linking to your portfolio, I think, just is an added bonus, if you will. It allows the editor to look at different examples of your work and sort of research you as a writer a little more. But if you just have like one example, don't sweat it, just link that. But yeah, I recommend Contently. It's free. It's very easy to set up. So take a look into that. I mean, there are many others too, portfolio sites. You can, do a quick Google search and find tens of them. But that's the one I have experience with and the one that I would recommend. And let's do one more, and then we'll call it a day. We have a good question here from Melanie, who asks, if your blog content lends itself well to illustrating it with photos, do you get paid more if you are the photographer as well as the writer? Usually you do, but sometimes you don't. Usually this information will be in the writer's guidelines, because some
blogs will just want you to find images from the internet, and sometimes, well, usually it's royalty-free images, so you can look on photo sharing sites for that, or royalty-free photo sites for those images. But if you take them yourself, you usually can work something out with a publication, and a lot of the time, if the publication or the blog pays extra for photos, they will state that in the writer's guidelines. So just by reading through there, I mean, like I said, I cannot stress enough how much useful information is in the writer's guidelines page. It tells you almost everything you need to know. So you'll usually find that on that page, but not always, because some blogs just want you to have images to go with your articles, to accompany them, and they don't really care about who took them as long as you have permission to use them. So that's definitely something that you want to either inquire about or just see if you can find it in the writer's guidelines. So yeah, it depends on the publication, I'd say, but I think anymore, a lot of blogs don't pay extra for photos, but you might find the occasional one that will, and that can work out really nicely for you. So I think that will be it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you learned a lot. If you have any questions at all about what we learned today, or anything about freelance writing in general, please email us. Our email is support@writinglaunch.com. We try to respond as quickly as possible. We'll answer all your questions. We are here to help you. And look out for those bonuses coming your way over the next few days. And I hope you have a wonderful day.